Hi, thanks for joining us. Me, Steve Hayes, and my colleague Michael Darby from Element as we go into a deep dive as to what was talked about and discussion points in the latest Red CA meeting, which was held in Dublin in May 2024. I guess Red CA, we keep introducing it. What does it stand for? Radio Equipment Directive Compliance Association. Is actually where the whole of the industry gets together twice a year to talk about the hot topics within our industry, the radio industry. And so it comprises of us as test organisations and notified bodies, but also manufacturers, standards organisations, the policing of the directive, and also the European Commission as well. So it's a real coming together of the industry. And if you're interested in getting involved in some of these meetings and discussions, feel free to check out the Red CA website at redca.eu, which includes membership information. Really engaging, perfect opportunity for networking, and really feeling part of the industry. So, in terms of the topics of discussion, I mean, actually, before we get into the detail, there is a really change of philosophy, I would say, with the interaction from the Commission. You could think of the Commission as the rule maker, the boss, if you like, and they come along with, this is what we're thinking, this is where we're going, this is right, this is wrong type approach to stuff. And actually, the current incumbent from the Commission, the desk officer for Red, I don't know about you, but felt a lot more open and engaging as the meetings have gone by. And I really feel that we're getting a much better level of communication between the industry and the Commission itself, but also the amount of information that we're getting back. I don't know what your view is.
I feel the same. I came away with Louis Miguel, hopefully he won't mind us mentioning his name, but great input. He put a lot of effort in. He spoke for a long time. He took a lot of questions. He seems to take things seriously and he seems to understand it. So I'm really enjoying the meetings and I'm really enjoying the support we're getting from the Commission. I think it's great. Yeah.
So, I mean, just in terms, to a certain extent, that drives the agenda of what we talk about. And I think one of the first things that Louis Miguel from the Commission was highlighting is around harmonised standards delisting them from the official journal.
So you're probably hopefully aware that you have this European directives. And then you have this official journal of harmonised standards, and there'll be one of these documents for every directive. So let's say the Radio Equipment Directive, there'll be an official journal of harmonised standards. On this official journal of harmonised standards, there'll be all these standards. We call them harmonised standards then. And if you fully assess to this standard, you get what's called a presumption of conformity. Now, really, once a standard is on the directive, on the official journal, it kind of stays there until the most normal thing that would happen is the standards writing people would write a next version. And they'd put the second version on, maybe 18 months later, the original version would go off and that'd be it. There are rare occasions where they identify there's something wrong with the standard and they go, wow, okay, maybe it doesn't cover a safety aspect, or products are genuinely causing interference when tested to this standard, or they're unsafe. So that standard might be withdrawn from the official journal, but it doesn't happen very often. Well, interestingly, right now, the European Commission are looking at the official journal and saying, we want to withdraw some standards, not because they're creating an unsafe environment, but they're just a bit old, or they don't represent the latest state of the art. And it might be in cases like, for example, in 2016, when the Radio Equipment Directive came out, some old standards from the old RNTTE days, there was a bit of, look, can you list our standard and we'll update it soon? And then if that hasn't happened, they're going, well, look, time's up, But also there's some standards that promote particular type of technology, and then the standards writing is trying to race to keep up and to add new types of technology. And we see that, for example, in the Wi-Fi 6E standard, where some types of technology are supported in the standard and other types of technology are supported by the Commission's decision, but not yet in the standard. But then there are other standards, such as the 5 gigahertz vehicle ITS or cellular V2X standard, where it kind of doesn't provide for both technology types yet, and the Commission feels that although ETSI is working on the next versions, they feel like it's not coming maybe fast enough or in the correct way, and so they're talking of removing standards from the official journal if they don't feel like it really matches the modern state of the art. And I think it's just another reminder that the European Commission, they don't really have any need for there to be harmonised standards. A harmonised standard puts some responsibility on the European Commission, and if there's any question or debate, they maybe don't want that responsibility, I guess.
Actually, I mean, that's a good segue into the next point, which is on restrictions of the official journal. So as Michael was saying, the official journal, if a standard is published in that document, then it's considered to be a harmonised standard. And if a manufacturer tests or assesses their product to that document, then they get what's called a presumption of conformity to the directive. Because of the need for ensuring legal certainty with these standards, the Commission has put some restrictions on there. So, for example, there might be a limitation on frequency range. So the Commission might say, we're going to publish this standard, but it only provides a presumption of conformity over this frequency range. Above that, it doesn't, and the manufacturer is expected to mitigate that risk by doing something else. As it stands today, there are a number of restrictions in the official journal for some of those standards, which include tolerances and measurement uncertainties. And if you go back to some of Michael and I's previous videos, you'll get a better understanding about some of those discussion and topics. But fundamentally, the Commission has updated its understanding of what's really meant with measurement uncertainty and tolerances. And if it doesn't directly relate to the measurement itself, so it might be part of the setup, for example, then they're much more relaxed now because they understand more about that topic. And so it's great to hear from the Commission that those restrictions related to measurement uncertainty, because of that better understanding now, are going to be removed, which actually provides a pathway for a load of new standards or stuck standards to be published in the official journal. So we came away from the meeting thinking, right, well, for EMC, for example, standards, there are very, very few actually listed as harmonised standards at the moment. So essentially, many of those are now going to be unlocked. So we can expect to see the number of the 301, 489 series of standards, for example, being listed as harmonised.
Yeah.
One of the things that hasn't, or is sort of resolved, is around harmonics and flicker, because those are considered to be more generic standards, and the Commission, on the whole, does not like generic requirements. So we may find that all of the harmonics and flicker requirements in some of these standards are being removed, and those standards exist, but that they won't be listed in the official journal, and manufacturers will have to use those without a presumption of conformity and have to annotate their risk assessments and technical documentation as to what they've done to mitigate the harmonics and flicker issues.
And I feel like that's a good reminder that, like in somewhere like the USA, for example, they'll say, right, you test to these standards that we've published, and then everything else is okay. Whereas in Europe, you have to assess your product for all that it can do. And the harmonised standards are some of the tools that you can use. So if you remove the harmonics and flicker tests from the harmonised standards, it's not a case of going, yeah, I don't have to do that test anymore. You still have to do them, but you're expected to go and find those standards independently and do them to non-harmonised standards. It doesn't mean you don't do the test, it just means the standard is no longer harmonised.
Yeah. And then the last point, I guess, is around cables less than 3 meters. So on the whole, in the standards, there's a typical statement that goes along the lines of, if the cable is less than 3 meters, you don't need to do this conducted test. And that's been there since year dot pretty much, because the shorter the cable, the less effective it is as a radiator, and 30 megahertz is really the cutoff between doing a conducted and then doing a radiated measurement. And so that's been the status for many years, but now the Commission's picked up and gone, well, hang on a second, a cable that is 3 meters, a quarter wavelength is 25 megahertz or so, why wouldn't you do the testing, and so there is an argument that says, well, maybe you don't need to do the testing if the cable was less than 1 meter, or there is no technical justification for not doing it, so you'll have to do it on all types of cable. That's an ongoing discussion. It's actually a discussion between the ESO, so predominantly ETSI, and the Commission itself. And once that's been resolved, either there's going to be new restrictions added in the official journal, or the standards will have to be updated before they are, and therefore maybe a further delay for presumption and conformity on the EMC related topics.
Yeah, and all really a good reminder, and Louis Miguel kind of brought this up as a topic, is that around the world you have test standards. So we work in the world of EMC and radio and safety and SAR, so we have test standards, and there's lots of them around the world. But for European compliance to the directives, they're not just technical test standards, they're legal documents. So you could test to an ANSI standard and then use those results to apply the FCC rules, for example. Whereas in Europe, you're using these standards to meet the directive, but the standards, as soon as they become listed on the official journal, they are kind of used as some form of legal basis. And so just saying something like, oh, well, the manufacturer should choose whether this test applies or not, is a tricky thing for the European Commission to sit comfortably with, really.
So then that leads into free issue of harmonised standards.
Yeah.
For those that aren't aware, there was a court case, albeit for a different directive, it was actually for a toy safety directive. But the whole thing with the Commission is around legal certainty. As Michael's just suggested there, these standards actually are helping manufacturers demonstrate their legal obligations to the law. And so Malud is a court case that was concluded in March this year. And essentially it says, if you have harmonised standards that provide presumption to the law, then they have to be freely available. Now, in the case of Europe, ETSI free issue standards to users, because effectively it's the membership fees that pay for the production of standards, whereas many of the other standards, those that are derived from CEN, CENELEC, IEC, ISO, etc., actually you have to pay for those. The court case basically says, of all of those thousands of standards, if they are going to be published in the official journal for manufacturers to use to provide legal certainty to the law, then they will have to be free of charge. So whilst it's only a very small subset of the number of standards in the world, look out for that, because that will need to be implemented in due course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cyber?
Yeah, I was about to say, on the topic of harmonised generic standards that are difficult to get listed in the official journal, cybersecurity. So as we know, cybersecurity written into the Delegating Act for Articles 3.3 D, E and F of the Radio Equipment Directive. This will become a legal requirement from the 1st of August 2025. Manufacturers could be assessing their products now. I say assessing, maybe it's testing, maybe it's evaluating how their products work. It's kind of early days to consider getting a notified body certificate because the standards are still changing. And hopefully you understand, if you were to get a notified body certificate to a draft standard and then the standard changes, then the certificate kind of expires, and we're still over a year away and a lot of changes to the standard to take place. But the standards are in progress. They are expected to be finished in August 2024. So that would give the world 1 year to apply those standards. But you know, it's not a closed book exam where you open it and go, wow, I didn't know this was going to be in there. We all have access to the standardization request, so we know what the standard has to try and address. There are ways of assessing your product. There are other cyber standards out there. But Senelec are writing what will be the harmonized standards, or at least what will be the published standards. EN 18031, and then -1, -2 and -3 for the Article 3.3 D, E and F parts respectively. Now these standards are being written, they are generic standards, they are going to have decision trees for the manufacturer. As much as possible, Senelec has done a lot of work to remove terms like, making the decision and based on this opinion and unless you do this, then this. They're trying to make it as legally certain as possible, but it's a tough job for them and I don't envy them one bit. But the standards are expected to be finished in August, and the draft standards have been passed to the European Commission already. So the European Commission is reviewing them in parallel to the drafting to try and speed up the process, rather than waiting till the end and then saying, no, we don't like something you wrote 6 months ago and we're only telling you this now. And so this is a good work in progress, really, a lot of people actively involved. So then that will become a legal requirement on the 1st of August 2025. And then the Cyber Resilience Act will come along probably around 2027. And then we've talked about them repealing the Radio Equipment Directive Delegated Act for Cyber at that point. Now, they're kind of modifying the word repeal, in fact, because the Cyber Resilience Act may not cover all types of radio. For example, vehicle products are out of scope of the Cyber Resilience Act. And so you'd have a product that might be in scope of the red cybersecurity, and then if you repealed it to replace it by a Cyber Resilience Act, some products might be missed out completely. So instead of repealing the red cyber, they're going to modify it. So it would probably still remain active for any product that isn't in the scope of the Cyber Resilience Act. So within Senelec, you have a working group writing the standards for the red cybersecurity, and you have a working group writing the standards for the Cyber Resilience Act cybersecurity. Good news is they're all talking to each other to make a nice, smooth transition, so there shouldn't be any or too many surprises when we go from the red cyber security requirements into the Cyber Resilience Act. So yeah, all good stuff, all good fun.
Guides next.
Oh yeah.
So we have the directive, that's the law, but sometimes with law it needs a bit of interpretation. And so we have the Red Guide. It's an official document published by the Commission itself. And yeah, from time to time, new issues come up, discussed, debated and resolved, and interpretation is provided. And we're just at the point now where the Red Guide needs to be updated. So ADCO Red, who are if you like, the police for the directive, are in the process of updating that at the moment. The pre-step to that is Article 3.4, which is on common charger. So that's the harmonizing, if you like, of a USB-C type connector. And yeah, there's some ambiguity in the directive, or the delegated act, I should say. And so the Commission has published a guide to remove that ambiguity and provide clarity as to what is, what isn't, what definitions actually mean. So watch out for that. That should be, well, the Article 3.4 guide has already been published, and the Red Guide is due for publication during the course of 2024.
Yeah, well, I think we kind of hoped that we would have had the updated Red Guide by now. We kind of hoped we'd have had it in 2023, still ongoing. But again, it's not a case of people being lazy. It's a case of these are complex topics. You know, ADCO Red are really working hard on this, but they've got some difficult topics to resolve. You know, what do you do when you put a radio into a vehicle? Or cybersecurity, what do you mean by indirectly connected to the internet? All those types of things. I mean, even the Article 3.4 common charger thing. I think a lot of people, when the Delegating Act came out, you thought, oh, okay, so surely it will just say the USB port is the funny little oval now instead of the rectangle. But there's a lot more to it than that. It's all about how the charging circuitry works, and it's more of a construction sort of requirement. So there was a requirement for a clear guide. And as for the red guide, yeah, we're waiting for more information. And a lot of things have changed since the original red guide. You know, wireless power transfer, we used to think of that as an ISM, non-radio signal, and therefore out of scope of the red. But a lot of ISM now, a lot of WPT is radio equipment, and so there's a lot of changes there.
Yeah. Lots of other things talked about in the meeting. We got updates from the various different standards organisations, so ETSI, IEC, CISPRA. We had updates from TCB Council, which Michael provided. Go and check out his other videos so you can get an update as to things talked about there. Then also what's happening in Japan, some of the other regions as well. I gave an update on radio in vehicles. You talked about that a few moments ago. Just by way of introduction, it's a complex topic in its own right. Fundamentally to do with, in any other industry, when you put a radio in something else, a host, then the host itself becomes radio equipment. In the case of a vehicle, the vehicle doesn't actually become radio equipment if it's type approved. If the vehicle is a piece of machinery, for example, then it does become a piece of radio equipment. So give you a hint of some of the complexity in there. And so we have a whole working group discussing those topics, and then who takes responsibility for the final vehicle itself. So within our working group and the Red CA, we've raised this topic to the Commission, ADCO, and some of the regulators in Europe. It took a little while to get traction, but it's very much on their agenda and radar now, and they're actively producing some supplementary guidance as to who takes responsibility and which actors in the supply chain need to do what. The interesting thing is actually there is a responsibility of the final equipment manufacturer, in this case we call them the vehicle manufacturer, needing to do a risk assessment of all of these radios put together inside a vehicle and making sure that from a radio perspective that everything is compliant with the directive itself. So that's interesting. We've provided a lot of feedback on that. The Commission's taken that on board. Other stakeholders have provided feedback as well. We're just waiting for that final version to come out now. So there's going to be some supplementary guidance issued by the Commission. And then ultimately, that document will get integrated into the Red Guide. Whether it makes the cut for this one that we're just talking about, we'll wait and see. But if not, I'm sure it'll be in the next revision of that as well.
Yeah.
Other things,
other guidance. So the Red CA, we have these documents, TGNs, technical guidance notes, and these are, they're more than just a bit of advice. These are really clear instructions to the notified body community. This is how you assess the type of product. And because there are so many members of the Red CA that are not notified bodies, so all the manufacturers, all the test labs, they become the default industry guidance. It would be wrong to say they're endorsed by the European Commission, because that's not strictly true, but the European Commission and market surveillance authorities do observe these guidance notes in their development and have plenty of opportunity to comment and object. So they are sort of industry technology guidance documents. And one of them, TGN20, is all about RF exposure or SAR testing. I wrote that originally back in October 2020. Seems like yesterday, but the world has moved on. There's a lot of exciting new developments in the RF exposure world. We have adaptive power density or incident power density for measurements at higher frequencies. We have different test methods for lower frequencies. We have new standards for antenna array systems. We have developments on things like time average SAR. And we have changes with regard to what we think is state-of-the-art body SAR test distance. So a lot's happened in the last 3 years, and I'm working with the same team of people who created the TGN originally to make a next version of that. So good times.
Yeah. There's loads of other stuff that we talked about in Red CA. to the point where we can't cover all of the topics now. You sort of need to be there to get really a feel for the sorts of topics that we talked about. But things like reconfigurable radio systems, refurbished products, you know, take a cell phone or a mobile phone, for example, you smash the screen, you then buy a non-OEM replacement because of the right to repair regulations which exist in Europe. But if that's not from the original equipment manufacturer and you buy a generic one and put on there, that modification is so substantial. Is it actually the same product, or have you refurbished it to the point where it no longer represents the original product that was tested? Because you know, things like SAR, its EMC and radio performance can all be affected by those things. So that was a really good topic. Likewise with replacing batteries in certain things. You know, some of these batteries that have got active circuitry, especially for lithium-ion related batteries with their active battery management systems, or BMS, have a really fundamental impact on the overall product's performance. So that's a really hot topic of debate at the moment, not resolved. But yeah, I think, you know, a lot of these other topics we'll pull out. Maybe we'll do separate videos for those, so go and watch those as we record them. But other than that, I guess probably that's a wrap on what happened in Red CA. Yeah. Our next Red CA meeting is in November.
Week of the 4th of November.
Yeah, so we'll do an update following those meetings. And I'm sure there will be other topics between now and then. So again, watch out and we'll update you. You're going to do, one topic, I think you're going to do a separate one on in-between times, which is on spurious emissions, receiver performance, those sorts of things. So that was a really interesting topic. Michael presented on that in the meeting itself, very well received by everybody. And it was one of those sort of elephant in the room topics, if you like, that everybody sort of doesn't like to talk about because it's a big deal. So
I wasn't sure if I was going to get booed off the stage, or I imagined myself in stocks with rotten tomatoes being thrown at me, or you know, was it going to go the other way? And luckily for me, it went the other way. I wasn't quite carried out on people's shoulders, of course, but no, I think it turned out to be a topic everyone was saying. Good that you brought this up. The history of it is that you either had a non-radio product that you would test at EMC product standards, Senelec for example, or you'd have a radio product that you would test to ETSI radio standards. And the spurious emissions limits in non-transmit mode, they evolved separately, like animals on different islands, you know, and so they're quite different. And so when you've got a mixture of products, such as radio in a washing machine or radio in a laptop, radio in a vehicle, or you know, just any power tool, for example, you've got this situation where engineers will say, I think I know what to do. I'll apply the radio limit to this signal and I'll apply the EMC limit to this signal. And engineers do that and everybody kind of looks away a little bit. But if you follow the legal paper trail and the background and the history, which I did a lot of research into, there are some legal hurdles that are quite difficult to get over, actually. And so I've kind of taken on this as a new challenge. And this was a good thing about the Red CA. It wasn't just a one-way presentation by me. I kind of raised this issue of like, this is a problem, we need to fix this, and we'll fix it. So yeah, it's good. It was interesting. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. So well done for getting to the end of this video. There's a lot of topics in there. Some of them are maybe of interest to you. Some of these topics we're actually going to pull out, like the one that Michael just talked about there, into a separate video. So look out for those. And if they don't interest you and you're just in for the general update, then look out for the video that we'll do towards Christmas time 2024 after the last Red CA and TCB council meetings. So thanks for tuning in and see you next time.
Bye-bye.